Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing a video about where to start with murder mysteries. If you are either new to the genre, you love the genre but you need some new recommendations, or you kind of want to break into like a different category of murder mysteries, this is the video for you. So we are going to start with historical mysteries. I personally just love historical mysteries. 2 out of 3 of these are also considered cozy mysteries. One of them is not, and I will indicate that as I go just in case, you know, depending on what your interest and tastes are with reading. The first one I'm going to recommend is the Lady Hardcastle mystery series by T.E. Kinsey. This series I absolutely love. I'm currently on the second book I picked up from my library. It's called In the Market for Murder, and I'm just covering up my library's name there, but this book it has been going really well. This first book in the series I absolutely adore. Basically we have our 2 main characters. We have Lady Hardcastle and her maid Florence Armstrong, and they are a dynamic duo. So essentially the series starts off where they have retired to the country. They've been together for like 14 years or so. Lady Hardcastle's husband has passed away. I think it's been a while since he's passed away, and they've retired to the country for like a quieter life. So the first book in the series is actually called A Quiet Life in the Country. Well, surprise, surprise, the quiet life in the country doesn't quite happen as they expected, because they come across a body and like hanging in the woods, and it appears as if the man hung himself, but when they look at the scene there's some oddities that make them suspect that he didn't actually hang himself. It's just staged to look like he committed suicide. The mystery is just, it's so good. I love the banter between these 2 characters. It's some of the wittiest dialogue I've read in a while. I was actually like chuckling aloud as I was reading parts of the Lady Hardcastle mystery series. They are a fantastic dynamic duo. Lady Hardcastle has, you know, the status and stuff, so she can kind of get into these interesting places. She can, you know, go to different parties and social events, and then Florence is able to go about town. You know, people don't look at her and like have all these airs and graces like they did with Lady Hardcastle, so she's able to kind of get more information out of people in a different way. So it's kind of interesting how they combine the like both of their like backgrounds and stuff to kind of get information in different ways. Lady Hardcastle is just hilarious. She's so witty, and Florence is also like kind of a no-nonsense kind of person, so seeing them play off each other is just hilarious. I just can't wait. This book has been really good, and then the first book, I absolutely love it. It was a 5 stars, so I could not recommend this enough. It is, what does this take place in? This takes place in 1909, so it is in the very early 1900s, and it is set in England. So my next recommendation is the one that is not cozy. This one's definitely fairly graphic. There are some scenes, like a trigger warning for like some brief scenes where women are being assaulted in particular ways, and so there are some violent scenes to it. Overall, I didn't find it to be too bad, and I'm mostly a cozy mystery reader, so I didn't find it to be like too strong for my personal taste, but just a warning, there is a bit more of that intensity and more graphic descriptions in this book. So the book I'm recommending is called Dead Girls by Nekesa Afia. This is the first book in the Harlem Renaissance series. I have read both book 1 and book 2 in the series. Book 2 just came out this July. It's called Harlem Sunset and has the most beautiful cover. Like, look at this cover. I loved Dead Girls, the cover for that I thought it was beautiful, but Harlem Sunset, it's one of my favorite book covers like this whole year that I've seen. I love it so much. But basically our main character in this, her name is Louise, and in the first book we learn that she is considered Harlem's hero because when she was like a late teen to young adult, she was actually kidnapped along with several other girls at the time who were found murdered, and she actually ended up escaping and helping other girls who were also there escape, and so she was considered hero. However, the person who had been killing these girls and kidnapping them was never caught. So fast forward, and she's like in her mid-20s or so when the series starts, and she is working at like a dance club and just doing different like odd jobs, waitressing, and she is living with her girlfriend, and things are going okay for her. There's definitely some not great things in her life, but unfortunately some girls about the same age as when she was kidnapped start ending up like being found dead again. So it seems that the person who had kidnapped her years ago is now returned and is repeating the same type of crime. So this book takes place in 1926 in Harlem, and Louise essentially is she's kind of a reluctant sleuth. Unlike a lot of these characters, like in the Lady Hardcastle mysteries, they kind of involve themselves in the mysteries intentionally. She kind of gets roped in by the police in a very like twist her arm, not good kind of a way, but she gets roped into it and she starts to kind of do some sleuthing. The police kind of rope her in because she's an African American woman. She's able to blend into certain areas and like, you know, clubs and places that the police, being, you know, white and male, wouldn't be able to blend into. So she's kind of their eyes and ears in certain places that they want to investigate and gather information about. And that's kind of what the premise of the book is. I don't want to give too much away, but I did really enjoy this. The writing is very rich. The characters are all incredibly fleshed out. I loved reading about Louise. I loved reading about her girlfriend, Rosa Maria. Her girlfriend has like a great personality. It's explored even more in book 2. They just have a really great character development like together. I loved her development throughout the book. I loved learning about her family and her past and how she interacts with them, and it's just, there's a lot of really like heart-wrenching moments in it. It's definitely a good read. I had some moments I was tearing up. It's quite intense, I would say, overall, but it was a fantastic mystery, fantastic character development. I really recommend the series. I've enjoyed both book 1 and 2 immensely. Alright, so last but not least for the historical mysteries category, I also included Rhys Bowen. So she writes both the Royal Spyness mystery series and the Molly Murphy mystery series, and I am a huge fan of both. I would recommend both highly. The Royal Spyness series, it takes place in England around like, I want to say like the early 1930s or so, and it features Lady Georgiana, or Georgie, who is like 34th in line for the throne or something like that, and she is a royal but kind of like a minor royal. She doesn't have the same allowances and money and wealth that a lot of the royals do in the area because she's unmarried, and so she kind of takes on odd jobs and stuff, and this gets her into different predicaments where she ends up finding bodies, and at some points later on in the series, the queen actually enlists her help to kind of investigate other royals. It's really interesting. I love it. But the one I'm going to mostly focus on today is the Molly Murphy mystery series, which features Molly, who is an Irish American immigrant. She has fled from Ireland in the first book because she committed a murder, but in self-defense, because a man was trying to force themselves on her, and she fought back, and she flees the country because she's afraid of being hung for her crime, essentially, even though it was committed in self-defense. So we kind of follow her as she goes through like Ellis Island, as she gets into New York, and the series is fantastic. There's all these amazing mysteries throughout it. I love the Molly Murphy series, and I would recommend it if you're someone who likes historical mysteries and you like ones that kind of involve some of the politics of the time. Depending on the book you pick up from that series, there's different ones that feature like different prominent topics in like women's rights, classism. There's ones that feature lots of different things, but especially I would say women's rights and like classism are like heavily featured topics. There's ones where Molly has joined like protesters. There's ones where she's like infiltrated like a shirtwaist factory, and she's sewing alongside women, and she's reporting on the terrible conditions and stuff that they're in. So she's a very spunky, very lively, feisty character. I really enjoy her, and her evolution throughout the books and series is really great. The descriptions of the time, it really makes you feel like you're kind of walking the streets of New York with her in the very early 1900s is when this is set, and it's really interesting, and the mysteries are always well thought out. I really enjoy that series. Okay, so the next one we're going to be talking about are some classic mysteries. If you're new to this genre, do not be intimidated by these. These are actually, I think, quite readable. There's not too much like language that's kind of like, you know, very unfamiliar to like a modern day reader. At least from my experience, I didn't find too much that I was like unfamiliar with in terms of like terminology and stuff. And I would strongly recommend Agatha Christie. I mean, she is the queen of murder mysteries in my opinion, and she's kind of the one who actually jump-started the cozy mystery genre from my understanding. So a couple ones that I would recommend from her are The Murder at the Vicarage. This is the very first in the Miss Marple series. Miss Marple is this elderly woman. She's, I think, hinted to be about 75 in some of the books, or somewhere in her 70s basically, and she lives alone. She's kind of on the edge of town, and she is a bit nosy, kind of a gossipy sleuth, but she is an amateur sleuth, and she knows her people, she knows her motivations, and time again in the Miss Marple series, the police have to come to her for help, and I think she's she's an amazing sleuth. The first book in the series for Miss Marple is The Murder at the Vicarage. As the title suggests, a murder occurs at the Vicarage. What I like about this mystery is not only does it introduce you to the world of Miss Marple, but it was very interesting the way the plot laid out, like the timing of the crime, and it was just incredibly interesting. A lot of the Agatha Christie books that I've read so far, it's very like interview based, I would say, so you're kind of following along a certain character or so, and you are going through and they're interviewing people and you're kind of comparing stories as you go along. All of the Agatha Christie books are cozy, so there's no like graphic descriptions of, you know, the crime or like blood or like any romantic scenes. Like it's more like I don't like the word clean, but you know what I mean. It's a little less you know, it's just not as graphic. So if you're someone who doesn't like gory descriptions or that sort of thing, then you would fit really well into the Agatha Christie world. Couldn't recommend her enough. Miss Marple is highly recommended. The other one that I really have loved so far from the series, I've loved all the Miss Marples I've read, if I'm being honest, but the other one that really stood out to me was called The Moving Finger. I think that is the third book in the Miss Marple series, and the premise of that is what catches me every time. Basically, throughout the town, people are receiving these letters, and they're like made from like cutouts of like magazines, so you can't tell who, or like books or something, like they're made from cutouts, so you can't tell the handwriting or anything, and like kind of like a ransom note like you see in the movies. And so they're made from these like cutout letters, and they're accusing people of awful things or claiming awful things about them, like really awful things, like not like, oh, I think you're a gossip and a terrible person, but like we're talking like they're accusing people of like murder or like just, I mean, really cruel, like awful things, and people are getting very upset about that naturally because you know, you don't want like a strange letter appearing in your mailbox accusing you of some terrible thing. That's obviously, it's a bit upsetting, and people are receiving these, but the police are just stumped, like they don't understand what's happening, and unfortunately the letter leads someone to actually committing suicide because of how disturbed they were by what was in the letter. So it's really, really bad. The police get Miss Marple involved, and the resolution to that book, it was so good. I was so impressed. Every single Agatha Christie, you just sit there at the end as the reveal is happening, and it's always satisfying. It's always so impressive. I've never read quite like any other mystery that's been so involved with all of the breadcrumbs spread throughout it and how everything comes together. If you've never read an Agatha Christie, I would recommend it. If you're interested in like a one-off Agatha Christie, the one I would recommend that I recently did a reading vlog on, I'll link it above if you want to check it out, is And Then There Were None. This is possibly the most famous Agatha Christie, except for maybe Murder on the Orient Express. I'd say between those two. But And Then There Were None, wow. You can listen to my reading vlog for more thoughts on that. It is a spoiler-free reading vlog, so if you want to check that out, even if you haven't read the book, there aren't spoilers in it. Basically, the premise is that 10 strangers are invited to this island. It's remote, and in the middle of nowhere. It's like there's like a spooky manor and everything on the house. They're all invited. They're all from different walks of life, different ages, different like genders, different backgrounds. Like it's very like a unique group of people. Like some of them are invited under the guise of, oh, you're coming to a party, or oh, it's your friend who's inviting you. So they're all invited under different like reasons and by different people. So it's really strange. And when they all arrive that night, they realize that they don't know each other, that the person that they thought they were meeting or what they thought they were attending is not actually what they are attending. So they're kind of like, okay, this isn't good. Well, unfortunately, one of them ends up dying in a strange manner. At the same time as all of this, there is this very macabre nursery rhyme that is hanging in everyone's bedroom, and it features 10 lines that involve people dying in different ways, and uneasily and scary enough, the first person that dies in this actually dies kind of according to the nursery rhyme. And one by one, people start to continue to die, and they're kind of following the nursery rhyme roughly as they go. And it's a really unsettling mystery because you know people are just going to keep dying, and you don't know why, you don't know how. They're cut off from like going back home because of the really bad weather, and there's no phone connection, nothing like that. So they are trapped on this island and dying one by one. So this is really great. I would say this is the most suspenseful Agatha Christie I've read, just because the other ones typically involve maybe like one murder, maybe two murders, but it's mostly like interviewing people, going around like the town, talking to people. But this one, all the characters are interacting with each other. It's much more like present in the moment. It's very suspenseful. Very quick read, very easy read in my opinion. It just was so compelling. Like I had to know. And the way it wrapped up, I thought it was great. Over 100 million copies of this book have sold, so it's not, you know, there's a few other people on this planet who would recommend this book as well. Lastly, for the classics, if you have not read it, I'm sure you've heard of it, but Sherlock Holmes, I had to put it on this book on this list because it's Sherlock Holmes. Like, he is such an iconic character. He is in so much pop culture. But I have read a couple of these. This is the Seasons Classic Edition. If it's still available, I will link it below. It's very beautiful. I really, really love these. I have a couple of these for some of my favorite classics, and it's just fantastic. It is, it's not considered a cozy mystery necessarily like the Agatha Christie, but it's still not a very graphic mystery. There's not like a lot of gore. It's mostly not considered a cozy just because it's set in a large town, like, you know, it's set in London, so it's in a very large area, and then you have a person who's not an amateur sleuth who's the main character, because Sherlock Holmes is a professional detective. Him and Watson crack me up. They are hilarious. It's just really fun. I feel like with Agatha Christie's mysteries, they're more solvable. Like, if you're paying attention and you really want to think about who did it, I think you can solve them more. I feel like Sherlock Holmes, the crimes and like the resolutions are a little more out of left field sometimes, and it's sometimes like I wouldn't be able to solve that because I didn't have access to the same information maybe that Sherlock did. So it's more of a fun murder mystery to read and be like dazzled by Sherlock's brilliance is kind of how I look at it. So depending on what you like, you might want to consider that. Personally, more often than not, I like the Agatha Christie style where I can read along and try to solve it. But every once in a while, reading something that's so dazzling like Sherlock Holmes is just fantastic. So those are my recommendations for the classic section of this video. Okay, so next we're going to be talking about some cozy mysteries. So these, again, usually feature amateur sleuths. They're usually set in small towns like Miss Marple, and most of the time the sleuth is female. They don't have to be, but I'd say the majority of the time in cozy mysteries the main character is female. Amateur sleuth, they usually have some kind of interesting profession. So like in contemporary cozy mysteries, they're usually themed with something, like the main character is like a bookstore owner or a restaurant owner or something like that, and so you kind of get some fun slice of life moments that kind of lighten up the book, make it a little less scary to read before bed if you're somebody like myself who sometimes can't read something like scary or too thrilling before bed because like it'll mess up your dreams or it makes it hard to sleep, anything like that. Or if you're just looking for something a little more lighthearted because you've been reading a lot of heavy stuff recently, or you just like lighthearted in general, this is a really good genre for you. So my first recommendation is a bookish cozy mystery, and that is the Library Lovers Mystery Series by Jenn McKinlay. I would recommend anything Jenn McKinlay writes that includes her Cupcake Bakery Mystery Series. I'm a huge fan of that. She also writes a Hat Shop one, which I have not gotten to yet, but I really enjoy the idea of it, and I'm excited to get to that eventually. But the Library Lovers Mystery Series takes place in Briar Creek, and it's like a kind of Cape Cod-esque town. So this is one of them that I have just checked out from my library. It's called Hitting the Books. I think this is book 9 or 10 in this series. I really, really love the series. But basically, Lindsay Norris is our main character, and she is like the director of like activities and things at the library, and you hear a lot about her day job. There's some interesting library or bookish themed mysteries, which I really like, but it's just a fantastic series. If you really like character-driven books, I would recommend Jenn McKinlay. I feel like she does a really good job with her characters. You get to learn a little bit about their life as you go through each of the books in the series. You get to see things come together in their life. She has an adorable little puppy named Heathcliff, which I think is just fantastic, and I would highly recommend this. It's a really good, like, feel-good series. The mysteries are well thought out. They often involve like historical or like literary book mysteries in some way, which I really like. I think it's very thematic. I think it's fun. But she does such a good job. Like, if you want to check out cozy mysteries, Jenn McKinlay, you can't go wrong with her. So my next recommendation is Arsenic and Adobo, which is part of the Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mystery series. It's by Mia P. Manansala. This is so fantastic. I read the first Arsenic and Adobo earlier this year, and then I read Homicide and Halo, which is the second book, and that was even better. It like blew me out of the water. And the third book, Blackmail and Babinka, which is a Christmas addition to the series, will be coming out in October, which I am so excited for because I adore the series. So our main character in this is Leela, and she is 25 years old. She's recently moved back home and is working in her Tita, Rosie's kitchen, who she owns like a restaurant, and she is working there. She's not super happy with her life. She recently went through a terrible breakup. There's just a lot of bad things going on in her life. She's moved back in home, which just, you know, isn't where she wants to be in life. And unfortunately, like, a murder ends up happening in the first book right in front of her. She's kind of one of the people who's suspected of the crime. There's just a lot of drama going on. I really love this series for the family in this series because Leela and her family are hysterical. They are all really great characters. The drama and dynamics between the characters is incredible. I think it's a really fun time. It's really fun. They all get on each other's nerves so much in the book, but they also are always there, very loyal to each other, and it's really heartwarming but fun, and not like it's so realistic in my opinion in terms of like what a family is like, especially a large family like hers. And I have enjoyed this series so much. I can't speak highly enough about it. The descriptions of the food are mouthwatering and delicious. I think what this particular cozy mystery does that some don't do as much is that there's really good character growth between each, like throughout and during the series. You really see her grow as a character, and I feel like cozy mysteries usually the characters can be a little more stagnant, like they'll go through different life events and you read about it, but in this one she really evolves as a character. She matures more, she grows into, you know, different parts of her personality more, and it's fantastic. I love it. I think it's really incredible. It's a little bit darker than some cozy mysteries, but it's still definitely on the cozy side. There's no super graphic descriptions or anything like that. It's just a little heavier with some of the themes than other cozies I've read, but overall, highly recommend this series. She also has a Dosh Hound, and I just really enjoy anything with a pet in it. I'm there for it. Okay, so my final cozy mystery recommendation is the Scottish Bookshop mystery series by Paige Shelton. I love Paige Shelton's writing. I would recommend any of her cozy mystery series. I've enjoyed everything I've read by her, basically. Our Scottish Bookshop mystery series features our main character, Delaney, who is an American somewhere in the Midwest. She is like from the Midwest, somewhere in the US, and she ends up moving to Scotland kind of on a whim. Not like the most well thought out plan, but she moves out there for the chance to work in this really unique bookstore that also sells and like has a bunch of unique literary treasures. So there's like maps, there's like old desks of like royalty. The owner of the bookshop, Edwin, is this very eccentric and wealthy man, and he's like basically a collector of all these different things, and he needs someone to like catalog and determine their wealth and like the worth and stuff of the items, basically. And so he hires Delaney, who comes out and lives in Scotland, which is a huge culture shock for her. And one of the parts I do enjoy about the book is that it is a culture shock for her. It's really interesting to hear the differences in like slang or dialect. Like they really kind of don't shy away in the book from her not understanding certain things because of the way like people speak with a stronger accent, or not understanding certain bits of like slang or different things like that. I think the setting is incredibly charming. The other bookstore employees are all very fleshed out. They have their backstories. You get to learn about them in different parts of the series. And Delaney is a very like spunky, go-getter kind of sleuth. Pretty much every book I can think of in this series, there's about 7 in this series in total, they're all book themed in some way or some kind of literary tie-in, which I personally really love. So there's ones where there's been like lost collections of this or that. This one involves like this kind of kooky character who thinks she's like the reincarnated Mary, Queen of Scots, and she also like has a marked resemblance to Delaney. They're both like redheads, and it's just kind of an interesting, there's just a lot of interesting setup and like history and like book themed things that are just woven into this series, and I just love it. So if you're someone who is interested in like kind of a little more of like history woven into your present day cases, if you like the book themed cozy mysteries, if you're interested in reading about a different location than you're probably living in, I mean you could be from Scotland, but I know most of my viewers probably are not in Scotland right now, so I thought this was just an incredible series. I love Delaney. I can't, every time a new book in the series comes out, I'm always like on it immediately because I love the series so much. Okay, last section, we're going to go over some thrillers. One is a recent one I just read for a thriller like reading vlog. I'll link it above if you want to check it out. It's called One by One by Ruth Ware. So this one is sometimes kind of debated among fans about whether they like it as much because it's a little less thriller and a little more murder mystery than a lot of her other books are. But this is a murder mystery video, so I thought that's appropriate. The One by One basically takes place in the Alps, and this company named Snoop, which is like a tech company where they have like a phone app basically that allows you to listen to what other people are listening to at the same time. It's kind of like Spotify and like, I don't know, Twitter, like with live updates, I guess, kind of woven into one. It's an interesting concept. It's kind of explored in the book. And they're doing like a company retreat with like their big, you know, top members in the company. And so they rent out this like chalet and they're out there, they're going to do skiing, they're going to do corporate team building, all that good stuff, right? Well, unfortunately, they get massively snowed in. And when they come back in, they realize that one of their members has gone missing. They don't know. And kind of like the And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, people start to kind of disappear or be murdered one by one. And they're kind of all in this isolated area. They are deeply snowed in. Like, they cannot get out of where they are at. So they're all trapped in this chalet together with a murderer. And it's just terrifying. The suspensefulness in this is fantastic. It is written from 2 points of view, which is not my typical. In terms of reading, I usually like to read from one point of view. However, this was very well done. It was very easy to follow. It took me a few chapters to kind of get used to everyone's names because there were at least 8 or so characters introduced like all at once because you have all the members of the company. So it was a little overwhelming at first, but within a few chapters you kind of pick it up. And I loved this. It was such a suspenseful book. The motivations, the breadcrumbs, everything was really well thought out and just revealed. I loved it. The book had a great wrap up and really like, you know, told you like how things were going for the remaining survivors basically, and it was just such an interesting book. And I love the creepy, freezing cold, snowed in setting. I think that is just one of the scariest types of settings that you could possibly put like a murder mystery or thriller in because you're just trapped. Yeah, the setting of this book is just unmatched. I think it's just truly so disturbing, so creepy. You're just completely helpless. Like, it's either freeze to death by trying to escape or die because you stay in the chalet and the murderer gets you. I mean, it's pretty terrifying, so I absolutely recommend this. I think it's a great segue to, if you've never read a thriller before but you love murder mysteries, this might be like kind of a good combo, I would say. I just absolutely recommend it. I cannot wait to read my next Ruth Ware because this was fantastic. So the next thriller I'm going to recommend is actually the book that really got me into contemporary thrillers, because I've read some like psychological classic thrillers, but I've never read, this was like my first like really kind of big time contemporary one, and that is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This book is so, like, I read this in one day. Like, I couldn't put it down. I had to read it on my lunch break. I had to read it before, after. Like, I was reading it as much as I could because I needed to know what happened. So this actually has several points of views from what I remember. And basically the premise is that there is a wedding on a remote island. Again, so you kind of have that isolation, which just intensifies the scariness to me. And you're kind of going back and forth between a present time you're going back and forth between like flashbacks of what was happening like the day before the wedding and then at the wedding where they find a body. But so you know from the beginning that there is a body that's found like at the reception. However, you have no idea whose body it is. So you're going back in time and reading from different characters' points of views, and you're just sitting there like, who is it that's murdered? I don't know why they were, like, who's murdered, why they were murdered, who am I like getting attached to right now while I'm reading, and then finding out that they're murdered. This book was pretty intense. It was pretty dark. Definitely the most graphic, I think, of the 3 thrillers that I'm mentioning. But it was so interesting. Basically you have the different points of views. You have like the bride, you have the groom, you have the bride's sister, you have some of the people I think working at the like wedding reception area, and it's a really creepy thriller. There's a lot of interesting tiebacks to like the characters' past and like present, because a lot of the people are like schoolmates, so they kind of have like some past connections. It's a fantastic thriller. I could not put it down. It was very, very fast-paced. Since then, I have also read The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley, and that was also an equally amazing thriller in my opinion. That was all set within one apartment building, so not quite the isolation trope to the extent of being stranded on an island, but definitely still like very much like contained, where you know it's someone on the premises, which is the kind of mystery that I really like. And then our last thriller recommendation is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This book is interesting to me, and I will recommend this book with a caveat. I hated his first book, The Silent Patient. I recently read that in that thriller vlog that I linked above. If you want my full thoughts on that, you can watch that above and hear me kind of rant a little bit about how much I hated that book, because it might be the worst book I read this year. However, The Maidens, which is his second thriller, which is the first one I read of his, I enjoyed. I gave it 4 stars. I read it in one evening over a couple of hours. Basically, the premise is our main character, her name is Mariana. She is like a group therapist, and she is struggling with a lot of grief, and I thought it was very interesting to read from a character who is so like burdened with her grief, because about a year earlier she had lost her husband who had drowned when they were on vacation together, and so she is just heartbroken. They had a really like happy marriage, they were like really in love, and she is just completely heartbroken over this. They didn't have any kids, however they do have a niece, and her niece is at Cambridge, so this has a lot of dark academia vibes if you like that. It also has a lot of Greek mythology woven in, like references and things, so if that's something that kind of piques your interest, you'd probably like this. But she basically gets a call one day from her niece Zoe, who tells her that her friend, like one of her best friends, has been murdered. Like, and not just murdered, but like brutally murdered, like extremely brutally, very, very like it's brutal. It's very brutal. So Mariana immediately drops everything as she runs out to see Zoe, because Zoe is really like, I think, her like remaining family basically now that her husband has passed away. I think her parents are gone at this point. She doesn't really have other family, and so she immediately goes into like protective surrogate mother kind of mode with Zoe, because Zoe's parents, I think, had died at a pretty young age for her as well. So she goes out there to comfort Zoe, and strange things keep happening on campus, and there's this one professor who has this group of young women, like his students, called the Maidens. They're like this exclusive club, and they go off and there's a lot of strange rumors about them and like the rituals they do, and like it doesn't sit well with Mariana, and it won't sit well with you either when you're reading this. But basically the book, she starts to get involved in the case and try to figure out what happened to Zoe's friend, and there's a huge amount of drama going on. I couldn't put it down. It was definitely good. I will say The Silent Patient, the female characters were pretty were very flat, like awful. This one I could see where some people might make the argument that Mariana is not the most fleshed out character. I think she definitely had some, like, I don't think it was the greatest fleshed out character ever, but I do think it was enough where it didn't deter me from enjoying the thriller and the fast paced plot and like the setting and everything. So for me it was enough that I was still like happy enough with it. The ending, I just sat there just floored. Like, I predicted a part of the ending for that thriller, but I was just sitting there, like the reveal, all of it coming together, so intense, so incredible, absolutely thrilling. Couldn't recommend it enough. So that is the end of this very long murder mystery recommendation video. I hope this gives you some ideas if you are new to the genre, looking to break into a different subcategory within the genre, or just looking for some inspiration. I hope this is helpful for you guys. Please let me know down below if you were to recommend a book or two to a new reader who's getting into the mystery genre. What would your recommendations be? And thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I do upload mystery videos, book videos in general, but especially mystery videos every single week on my channel, so I don't want you to miss out. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!